Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. There on the poplars we hung our harps, for there our captives asked us for songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, "Sing us one of those songs of Zion." How can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. Remember, O Lord, what the Edomites did. Some translations say the sons of Edom. Remember, O Lord, what the Edomites did on the day Jerusalem fell. Doesn't always say Jerusalem fell. Sometimes it says the day of Jerusalem. So it says, remember, O Lord, what the sons of Edom did on the day of Jerusalem, or the day Jerusalem fell. Tear it down, they cried. Tear it down to the foundations. O daughter of Babylon, doomed to destruction, happy is he who repays you for what you have done to us, he who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. So you see why this came up in my study, because it's got the same thing there at the end of that verse. Okay, so this is a psalm about two cities. I'm going to tell you, I spent 8 hours studying this psalm, trying to figure out how I'm going to teach it to you. So why is it I want to teach it to you? I spent 8 hours. I spent 6 hours, and I spent 2 hours this morning writing these notes. Now I'm going to go through this. And what I really think the bottom line of this psalm is what is captivity like? That's what I think this is really about. Because in my mind, I look at this and it looks to me like it applies to the Babylonian captivity. But everything I read says this applies to the Assyrian captivity with prophecies for the future. But the bottom line is it's about captivity, and that's the main thing. They're uncertain as to when it was written. They're uncertain when it was written. They're uncertain as to who wrote it. John Phillips believes that it was written by a Hebrew who went into captivity by the Assyrians and who ended up in Babylon. He comes to that conclusion partly because of the position of the Psalms, suggesting that it was included in the Hebrew hymn book by Hezekiah. So that would have been long before the Babylonian exile. Babylon was not a powerhouse that it would become, a world power. This unknown Hebrew was able to make his way from Babylon to Jerusalem, where he wrote the psalm. The other view is it was written by Jews in Babylon before the fall of Babylon, before the fall of Jerusalem. Even before the Babylonian captivity was added to the hymn book, still added to the hymn book by Hezekiah. All right, the psalm can give us a good feeling of what it was like to be in captivity. So let me just keep going. I think that it gives us a good feeling about what it's like to be in captivity. Let me read verse 1 again. By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, is located on the northern Iraq on the Tigris River. You know where the Tigris River is? Found this map on the internet, printed it off.
Nice.
Pretty good, huh?
That's cartography at its finest, I think.
Yeah. I did all this at 4 o'clock this morning, so you're gonna have to make allowances. The Tigris River runs like this, and it was right there. The Euphrates runs right here. Babylon is right there. All of that area is Babylonia. All of this area is Assyria. Sometimes they probably overlap. But that's the bottom line. The rivers of Babylon does not mean he's in Babylon necessarily. He says he is by the rivers of Babylon. All of that is the rivers of Babylon. The eastern boundary of the Euphrates is the Euphrates is the eastern boundary of the Promised Land. The 4 great world empires, which would be Babylon, Medo-Persian Empire, the Greeks, and the Romans. All 4 of those could not become world powers. They could become only world powers only when they had the Euphrates River. That was the thing that controlled everything. That was the main river of Babylon. These were the rivers of Babylon, and that is where the exiles sat, wherever they were, the rivers of Babylon. As they sat, they remembered Zion. They remembered Jerusalem. Normally, you would think remembering or was reminiscing, which is generally a joyous occasion. You think about happy times, but the Bible says they wept. These exiles had seen the great cities of Assyria, and had seen in the Euphrates Valley, Nineveh, one of the largest fortified cities of the world, was one of the largest fortified cities of the world. It took 3 days to walk around it. Sounds big to me. But such vision of the past would bring only unhappiness, for they were captives. You can't be happy. I would think if you had experienced any kind of prosperity and freedom like the Northern Kingdom did, you're never going to be happy in captivity. Okay, and yet they find themselves in captivity, so they can't be happy. Their thoughts turn to Zion, the city the Northern Kingdom once scorned. Remember, we had the Civil War. The Northern Kingdom went this way. You got the dividing line. Southern Kingdom's down here. Jerusalem's down here. Northern Kingdom's up here, where they had Samaria, the capital of the Northern Kingdom, where they had their 2 golden calves. One was in Dan, one was in Bethel. But they were enemies. The Northern Kingdom was enemies of the South. So it was not all good times, but now they would probably love to see Zion. Jerusalem has not fallen. Their country, their situation is totally in disarray because of their captivity, and I would think all of a sudden Jerusalem doesn't look so bad. I will admit, here's my thought. I will admit that to me, this seems more like captives of Babylon, of the Babylonian exile, rather than the captivity of Assyria. The psalm reads, interprets the same way, regardless. They're in captivity. If I had not been studying, I would have just thought that was a result of the Babylonian exile. All right, verse 2 and 3, let's read those. There on the poplars we hung our harps, for there our captors asked us for songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, sing us one of the songs of Zion. They hung their harps in a tree because they were mocked. You think, whether it be the captors were Assyrians or Babylonians, you think they were nice to their captives? They mocked them continually. They just hung their harps up there It says their captors, called tormentors, were demanding entertainment of some kind. They wanted songs about Jerusalem. Sing us one of the songs of Zion. Such a demand would only bring more sadness because they were captives and could only reminisce about such things. They could no longer experience them. So they hung their harps in a tree. Their captives are demanding that they sing, and they say, we don't want to do that. How can we sing songs of the Lord while we're in a foreign land? In their minds, they should never forget Jerusalem. And another thing I think you have to keep in mind is that these people were apostate. Why did they go into captivity in the first place? They forgot God, they lied to God, they did all kinds they worshiped other idols, they had other idols, everything God said, they forgot God, all of those things. And I think God was, he was righteously angry, sent them into captivity because of it. So I think they were apostate. And so talk about singing songs of the Lord, remember Jerusalem and all that is different for a godly person than it was for them. That's what I think. Since that is the reason, I already said that. So let's look at verse 4. Actually, I said read it 4 through 6. Let me read all that. How can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. If I do not remember you, if I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. We are captives. How do we sing, particularly songs of the Lord? They are too depressed to sing, and they don't want to sing for the captives for sure. I'm sure they got mocked on a lot more things than just things about their God and about things like that. They were captives by a totally pagan society. So I'm sure they mocked them about everything. One oath that they says they should never forget in verse 5. Verse 5 says, if I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. That is an oath. If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand cease to function. I won't be able to play the harp that I'm trained to play. I won't be able to swing a hammer and do the work I'm trained to do. If I forget Jerusalem, that's what I want. The other thing is, the same thing is true of his mouth. He says, may my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you. What does that mean? Your tongue gets stuck up in the roof of your mouth. Can't talk, can't sing, you can't give praises to God, you can't even give praises to your wife for anything. Your tongue is stuck to the roof of your mouth. Your mouth has ceased to function. Okay, so he says he is no longer, where is it? If I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. There is a significant difference to me in saying Jerusalem is my highest joy and saying God is my highest joy. I think these people were apostate. And I think Jerusalem actually meant more to them. I mean, they're in captivity, so now they have a different way of looking at things anyway. But the reason they went into captivity was because of the way they looked at God. And they're saying here, Jerusalem was the most important thing, but they're in captivity, nevertheless. Verse 7. Remember, O Lord, what the Edomites did on the day Jerusalem fell. Tear it down, they cried, tear it down to the foundations. Now, if you look at the original Hebrew, it says the day of Jerusalem. It doesn't say on the day Jerusalem fell. But many of the translations say the day of Jerusalem. Many of them say the day Jerusalem fell. Nevertheless, the cry is to remember what the Edomites did. They could have been, this could have been when Assyria surrounded Jerusalem the first time. That's when Hezekiah was king. Babylon was not the world power that they would eventually one day become. And that was the night that the angel of the Lord was called to kill 185,000 Assyrian troops. Remember that? The cry from the Edomites could have been that day. You know, they're ready to pounce on Jerusalem. It's surrounded. They could go level the place, go take it over. Their cry could have been that day to level the place, raise it down to the foundations. Or if it had been when the Babylonians surrounded Jerusalem and they were ready to invade, the same thing. What the Edomites did was tell them, chant with them, tear it down. What does it say? Tear it down to its foundations, is what the Babylonians eventually did. They raised it all the way down, left nothing. So, they did not participate, they only chanted. Like Edom would be judged, they only encouraged, I said. Look at Obadiah 12. You know the book of Obadiah is it's one page. I could probably study it, take 4 months to cover it. But it's 1 page long, and it deals 100% with judgment, with prophecy of judgment against Edom. Y'all flip over there to it. Amos, Obadiah. So it goes Hosea, Amos, Obadiah. Look at Obadiah 12. Sounds like a lot. It's one verse. You should not look down on your brother in the day of his misfortune, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. They were encouraging either the Assyrians or the Babylonians to tear the place down. The judgment here is partly because of that. Later, Edom would be judged for actually helping Babylon in capturing those who fled Jerusalem under siege of Babylon. Look at Obadiah verse 14. Verse 14 says, "You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives, nor hand over their survivors in the day of the trouble." So they not only encouraged them to tear the place down, now I don't know whether that was with the Assyrians or the Babylonians, but for sure with the Babylonians they helped. They stood out there at the crossroads, and when people were trying to get out of Jerusalem, get away from death and destruction, the Edomites waited for them, captured them, probably killed some of them, took some of them back as prisoners, but they actually helped the Babylonians, and that's part of the reason they're going to be judged. Just while we're there, look at verse 3 of Obadiah. It says, "The pride of your heart has deceived you, you who live in the clefts of the rocks and make your home on the heights. You who say to yourself, who can bring me down to the ground?" They lived in the rocky crags of the mountains. They would run out and fight the Israelites, and then they would run back up there. They just felt like they were impregnable, undefeatable, because of where they lived and the way they looked at themselves. And then down in verse 10 it says, because of the violence against your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. And then there's more stuff, really bad stuff about what's going to happen to them. But that's why they've hated Israel all of their lives. And when they saw a chance to help the Assyrians, saw a chance to help the Babylonians, either with encouragement to go get them, or to actually help them, they jumped at it to take that chance. Okay, verse 8 and 9. Oops. Close my Bible. Psalm 137. Verse 8 and 9. O daughter of Babylon, doomed to destruction, happy is he who repays you for what you have done to us, he who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. That's a beatitude. Happy is he. Blessed is he. Happy is he. It's a beatitude. It's a beatitude of vengeance, which is what makes it unusual. The psalmist calls for vengeance, repayment for what he has done to them. The repayment he demands of the daughter of Babylon, which would be descendants of Babylon or the people of Babylon. They will, the psalmist sees them as doomed. They will someday be destroyed, but as of right now, they aren't. The act for which the psalmist sees vengeance is for the one perpetrated against the innocent children. This was prophesied in Isaiah. Flip over to Isaiah 13:16, just to see it with your own eyes. Isaiah 16:13. No, 13:16. Sorry, Isaiah 13:16. It's the prophecy against Babylon. Their infants will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be looted and their wives ravished. Their infants will be dashed to pieces. So the psalmist calls on that. He calls on that to happen to them because of, among other things, because of the way they treated their children, their women and children. So that's the end of it. That's really all I've got to say about it. But that psalm was kind of a picture of what a captive would go through. And it just kind of stuck with me, and I wanted to cover it before we got through with our study. So that's all I got for you today.